The fastest cars, the best drivers, the highest level of racing around the globe. You're listening to Talk F1 from the Michael Papinchak Show, where I discuss every race lap by lap from the Formula One season. Now buckle up, because it's time to Talk F1. Hello and thank you for listening to the Michael Papinchak Show. I'm your host, Michael Papinchak, and this segment is called Talk F1. Formula One this past weekend was in Le Castellet, France, for the 62nd running of the French Grand Prix, and for the 18th time at the Circuit Paul Ricard. Now, the future of this race is uncertain. This could be the last French Grand Prix for the foreseeable future, as a contract that spanned from 2018 to 2022 has not been extended as of yet, and we do not expect to see the French Grand Prix on the calendar for the 2023 Formula One season. Now, this is round 12. I obviously was not in France. I watched the race from my home in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, using F1 TV app. Whether you are the most diehard F1 fan or someone who's new to Formula One, you must download the F1 TV app. It's only, I believe, $80 per year, and you can watch everything from the free practices, qualifying, races. Every Formula One fan needs the F1 TV app on there. I watch it on my iPad. I have it on my phone. You can watch it on your computer. All this access for only $80. So, like I said, this is round 12, the French Grand Prix in Le Castellet. And this is actually Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion, one of the most successful F1 drivers of all time. This is his 300th race. He is the 6th driver in Formula One history to reach this benchmark, and no one, after reaching this benchmark, no driver has actually won a Grand Prix after reaching this benchmark. However, this is Lewis Hamilton. So, Lewis Hamilton has not won a race yet this season, but if any driver can win a race after reaching the benchmark of 300 Grand Prix starts, it is Lewis Hamilton. Now, also, another former champion, Fernando Alonso, who won 2 championships with Renault, will, during this race, beat Kimi Räikkönen's record for having the most laps ever in Formula One. So, going into this race weekend, what is on everyone's mind, what is on my mind, is that Ferrari has won the past 2 Grand Prix. So have they, with their upgrades, their car setup, their strategy, have they gained an advantage over Red Bull? Well, let's get into the weekend. So in Formula One, on Friday, there are typically 2 free practice sessions. So we have free practice 1 and free practice 2. Now, another big thing that was on everyone's mind was this heat wave, this global heat wave. Now, the air temp in Le Castellet was 84 degrees Fahrenheit, but the track temp was 131 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, what does this mean? This is going to affect mostly the tires. The soft tires were unusable for the whole weekend. They would literally melt on that hot track. So we're going to be using the medium and the hard tires. And for this race, Pirelli brought right in the middle of their range the C2, the C3, and the C4 tires. So we are not going to be seeing that C4 soft tires. So Pirelli has a 5-tire range from C1 to C5, C1 being the hardest tire and C5 being the softest. So for this race, like I said, they brought the C2, C3, and C4. So it is way too hot to be using that soft C4 tire. Now, we're in the second half of the season, round 12 of 22. And again, who's it going to be? Red Bull or Ferrari? And has Mercedes, with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, made any advancements with their vehicle? Now, for free practice 1, which again was on Friday, Nick DeVries, reserve driver for Mercedes, was in for Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion. There's a new rule this season that your rookie driver needs to at least have 2 runnings in the F1 car, so he'll go in once for Lewis Hamilton and then another time, another race for George Russell. Robert Kubica was in for Valtteri Bottas at Alfa Romeo under that same rule. Now, during free practice 1, FP1 as they call it, Perez did have a spin, and Sainz and Magnussen will have grid penalties for engine and part replacements, and teams are bringing upgrades. So Günther Steiner was on. Listen, they bring in, for every race, they typically have a team principal that chimes in during the race and talks to the commentators, and it's always entertaining when Haas's Günther Steiner is giving the commentary from the pit wall. And so here are the results of free practice 1. Now, this is practice during the practice. Okay, so why do we have 3 practice sessions? Every track is different. The temperatures are different. Pirelli brings different tires, different compounds. So they need to adjust the car for that track. They need to raise the wing, lower the wing, high downforce, low downforce. Are we going to be using medium tires, hard tires? It helps them time the tires and get their pit strategies together over these 3 practice sessions. So they're ready for qualifying and they're ready for the race. But it's very important. It does still give an indication of pace. Leclair, Verstappen, Sainz were the top 3 finishers at the end of free practice 1. Again, Ferrari, Red Bull, right up top there. George Russell, Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri, the other Red Bull team. 6th position was Sergio Perez for Red Bull. Not great. He should be right up there with Verstappen. Then Norris for McLaren. Albon, Nick DeVries, Ricciardo, Zhou, Stroll, Ocon, Vettel, Alonso, Mick Schumacher, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Kubica, and Latifi. There's our boy, Nicholas Latifi for Williams at the bottom as usual. Not a great start for the Haas cars. Mick Schumacher, position 16. Kevin Magnussen, position 17. Later that same day, we have free practice 2, FP2. Obviously, the track temp still at a blistering 131 degrees Fahrenheit. We have no subs for drivers in FP2. And the results, Sainz, even though he will have a 10-place grid penalty for a new power unit, he is leading, followed by his teammate Charles Leclerc, then Verstappen, then George Russell and Hamilton, P4, P5. We see Mercedes right there nipping at the heels of the big boys, Ferrari and Red Bull. Then McLaren's Lando Norris, and then Gasly, Magnussen making up some places, P8 compared to FP1's P17. Ricciardo, Perez, not good. Sergio Perez, Verstappen's teammate at Red Bull, P10. Verstappen's P3. Why is he so far behind? Then Fernando Alonso, Valtteri Bottas, Sebastian Vettel, Tsunoda, Stroll, Albon, Zhou, Ocon. Mick Schumacher down at P19. Not great compared to his teammate Kevin Magnussen, who, like I said, was at P8. And then our boy Nicholas Latifi at the bottom, P20. So, on Saturday, we have FP3, free practice 3, and then qualifying. Track temp now at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. They got themselves a little relief. 82 degrees Fahrenheit air temp. Why do I mention these things? They are important. Like I mentioned, it can affect tire choices. It can affect the driver's just overall ability. Can you imagine driving a car where the track temp's 131 degrees? You know, and they're in those fireproof suits. They have the helmets on. They have gloves on. It must be extremely hot in those cars. No driver subs for FP3, and they did mention that Mercedes has 2 different rear wings, one for Hamilton, one for Russell. Which one will benefit the team better? And they had a very interesting pedal cam for Lando Norris from McLaren, where they were showing his footwork while driving the car. The results, my boy Max Verstappen leading the pack for FP3 using the soft tire, and Sainz, regardless of his grid penalty, still shows amazing pace, followed by his teammate Charles Leclerc, and then Hamilton. Perez again, even though Perez did better this time, went from P10 in FP2 to P5 in FP3, still should be much closer to his teammate. Why is he 1 second behind Max Verstappen? Everyone is scratching their heads, wondering what is going on with Sergio Perez. Have the upgrades or changes that Red Bull has brought benefiting Max over his teammate Sergio Perez? Then Russell, Alonso, Albon, Norris, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, Latifi, P12. Can you believe it? Can you believe he is not down in P20? Then Gasly, Bottas, Zhou, Magnussen, Ocon, Stroll, Schumacher, and Vettel. Not a great day for Aston Martin, as Sebastian Vettel is all the way down in P20. Now, the same day that we have free practice 3 on Saturday, we also have qualifying. Unfortunately for the drivers and the cars and the teams, the track temp is back up to 131 degrees Fahrenheit, air temp 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, not only will Sainz have grid penalties for power unit up changes, but also Kevin Magnussen from Haas. So we will be tracking their progress. They will have to start, well, we're going to see they will be starting from the back of the grid. But let's go through qualifying. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Out in round 1, in qualifying, there are 3 rounds. So they call them Q1, Q2, and Q3. And after Q1, the bottom 5 drivers are eliminated. Now we have 15 drivers in Q2. Then at the end, those bottom 5 are eliminated. Then in Q3, the top 10 drivers race for pole position at the front of the grid for the Sunday race. So out in Q1, Gasly for AlphaTauri, Stroll for Aston Martin, Zhou for Alfa Romeo, Mick Schumacher for Haas, and Nicholas Latifi for Williams, my boy, down in the 20th position as usual. In Q2, we lost Albon for Williams. We lost Vettel for Aston Martin, Bottas for Alfa Romeo, Ocon for Alpine, and Ricciardo for McLaren. So let's see who raced for pole position. The pole king this season, with his 7th pole position, came in at top Charles Leclerc for Ferrari, followed by my man Max Verstappen for Red Bull, and then Sergio Perez for Red Bull, right there in P3 to start the race. Second row, finally. What was he doing during the practice session? Who knows? But when it counts, he's up there with my boy Verstappen. Starting second on the grid is also Lewis Hamilton in P4, followed by Norris for McLaren, Russell for Mercedes, Alonso for Alpine, Tsunoda for AlphaTauri, Sainz for Ferrari, and Magnussen for Haas. Now we see Sainz and Magnussen qualifying P9 and P10, but as you know, as I've mentioned, they have grid penalties. When you make these kind of power unit replacements, you get grid penalties. Those are the rules. So, where will they start in the race? They will start at the back of the bus. Sainz will be P19 and Magnussen will be P20. So let's go over the starting grid. Front row, Leclerc, Verstappen. Second row, Perez, Hamilton. Again, it's Hamilton's 300th race. Could he be the first driver to win after reaching that benchmark? We are going to find out. And then Norris, Russell, Alonso, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, Ocon, his home race. He is French. Bottas, Vettel, Albon, Pierre Gasly, also a home race for him. He is French. Stroll, Zhou, Mick Schumacher, Latifi, and then, like I said, Sainz and Magnussen. For the race on Sunday, the track temp is in excess of 130 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, we will not be seeing that soft tire. So let's go a little bit lap by lap here. as it usually happens, because of the chaos around the first turn, the cars being so close together, there was a lap 1 incident between Tsunoda and Ocon. Tsunoda spinned contact with Ocon from Alpine, and Ocon did get a 5-second time penalty. At the start, Magnussen, who was down at P20, got all the way up to P13, so a good start for him, and Lewis Hamilton quickly overtook Perez to go from P4 to P3. We're going to be tracking Sainz. We're going to be tracking Magnussen because of their penalties. And lap 5, Sainz did go from P19 up to P13 by lap 5. And these opening laps of this race were really a huge battle between the two front rows, Leclair versus Verstappen and Hamilton versus Perez in the DRS zones. Now, if you don't know what DRS zones are, basically there are parts of the track where the driver can open his rear wing to help gain an advantage over another driver in front of him, to help get closer and to help pass. And you have to be within 1 second, though, and you can only use it in certain sectors. The cars from the previous generation did not follow each other very well, and so they created this DRS system to help reduce drag. So when you're within 1 second of the driver in front of you and you're in the DRS zone, you open that rear wing, and it helps you go a little bit faster, helps you gain on that driver, and then helps you pass them. So in these DRS zones, we had battles between Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton, and Perez, and it was straight line speed versus cornering speed, and you just had these phenomenal battles. And, you know, now that these cars can follow each other better with these new regulations for 2022, the DRS zones, I believe, are a bit more powerful, and you see a lot more dynamic racing at the front and actually throughout the entire grid. At lap 9, Magnussen pits for hard tires, goes all the way down to P20. Sainz is P12 by this point. And, you know, like I said, the team principal, Günther Steiner for Haas, was doing commentary from the pit wall, and he said these early pit stops for his drivers were so they could get some clean air. By lap 13, Sainz is up to P10, Magnussen from P20 to P17. Lap 16, Verstappen pits, goes from P2 to P7, and he goes on the hard tires. So, is it a one-stop strategy or a two-stop strategy? Another rule in F1 is you have to use 2 different compounds of tires. So if you start the race on hard tires, the next time you pit, you need to either go to the soft or the medium. If you stay on the hard, you will have to pit again for one of the other compounds. By lap 18, Sainz is up to P9, and the big thing you have to know about this race, if you remember anything from me talking about the French Grand Prix, is that at lap 18, Charles Leclerc, fighting for the championship this year, loses his back end and crashes his Ferrari. And obviously DNFs, did not finish. You will hear me say that a lot, DNF. You'll see that next to the driver's name on the F1 app or the F1 TV app. Leclair crashes. Big moment in the championship. This could be a turning point. Him not getting any points is a big deal. Obviously, there's a safety car and lots of pit stops. So during a safety car, obviously everything slows down. The cars bunch up, and your pit stop, basically the pit stop time, the time that you would lose in the pit, gets cut basically in half. It's almost like a free pit stop. So obviously when there are safety cars, you will see a lot of cars pitting for new tires, maybe a new front wing. Often you'll see a front wing change if they need to. So with Leclerc's crash, this puts Verstappen on the top in the P1 position. Now, obviously, Charles Leclerc was upset, screaming no like Darth Vader over the radio. Unbelievable. He thinks it's a throttle issue. Could have been just the driving mistake. Could have been the fact that Verstappen pitted in lap 16. Because when you battle, like I said, they were battling in the beginning of the race, you wear your tires out more. You're speeding up in those DRS zones. You're fighting for position. Did Verstappen and Red Bull make the right move by pitting early in lap 16? Leclair obviously did not pit. Usually, if your rival pits, you don't pit. You keep going. But did they make a mistake? Well, obviously, Charles Leclerc, always hard on himself at Ferrari, took full responsibility for that crash, basically saying that if he makes those kinds of mistakes, he shouldn't even be fighting for the F1 championship. Charles, I think you're a little too hard on yourself. Things happen. If it was a throttle issue, if it was a tire issue, there's a whole team involved here. It's just not the driver. There's a whole team. Watch F1 and pay attention when they show the pit wall, when they show the garages. There's dozens of people involved, strategists, engineers, the guys who take off and put on the tires during the pit stop, the pit crew. Lots of people involved here, Charles. You don't have to take all of the blame. But he is right. If he makes these, if it was his mistake as a driver, he makes mistakes like that, it will cost him the championship. So I mentioned earlier, lap 1, Tsunoda had that touch with Ocon, and that causes him to DNF as well. Leclerc obviously DNFs, and now under the safety car, Sainz is up to P8, Magnussen P17. So as the safety car is coming to an end, our top 5 are Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez, Russell, and Alonso. So lap 20 to 21, we have a green flag. That means the race is resuming. The safety car is into the pits. We are back to race pace. And Sainz overtakes both McLarens to jump from P7 up to P6. Unbelievable. By lap 22, Sainz is now P5 over Alonso. Sainz is making progress. And there is contact between Zhou and Mick Schumacher, and Schumacher spins. By lap 24, Sainz has a 5-second time penalty for an unsafe release under the safety car when he came out unsafely, obviously, in front of a Williams. So, when you're in the pit lane and lots of people are pitting under a safety car, it can be very dangerous. It's very busy. And what happened is a Williams was done with his pit stop, was coming down the pit lane, and Sainz went out in front of him, and he had to lock up his tires and basically push the brakes, just like someone stopping, suddenly on the road. In your road car, you have to slam on the brakes. But that can be very detrimental for an F1 car, as an F1 car is tuned very finely and not really designed to do that. So, 5-second penalty for Carlos Sainz. And at this point, Verstappen is maintaining the fastest lap ahead of everyone, trying to pull away from the pack to secure his win. By lap 26, Zhou has a 5-second time penalty for the Mick Schumacher collision. Lap 27, Verstappen now has a 3.3-second lead over P2 Hamilton. Maintaining those fastest laps, Verstappen has put himself well ahead of the pack and well out of DRS range. As I mentioned, DRS, you have to be within 1 second of the driver in front of you to use it. And Verstappen is well outside of that range with his 3.3-second lead over P2 Lewis Hamilton with Mercedes. Lap 28, Sainz is now P5. Magnussen, P14. Basically, he got screwed up by the safety car. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes is you go in for a regular pit stop, which takes 20-plus seconds. The next lap, there's a safety car, someone crashes. Now a pit stop's only 10 seconds. And unfortunately, you don't go back in. You have brand new tires. And that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes for Haas's Kevin Magnussen. By lap 20, Sainz overtakes Russell to get in the P4 position. Sainz was on the medium tires, Russell on the hard tires. So obviously, the soft tires will have the fastest lap time. Medium will be a little less, and the hard will have the slowest lap time. So typically, if Sainz is on brand new medium tires, Russell's on some used hard tires, it'll be easier, in theory, to overtake Russell, as we see here. But can Sainz finish the race on these medium tires. Obviously, also, they don't go as long. So the soft tires will have the least laps. Medium will have a few more laps. The hard tires will have the most durability, so you can go the most laps. So Russell, obviously on the hard tires, lap 30 of 53, will most likely be able to finish the race on those hard tires. But can Sainz finish the race on these medium tires? Could he win on these medium tires? Everyone's talking about, could Sainz win from the back of the grid? Well, we're going to find out. By lap 38, Latifi, my boy Latifi, spins contact with Magnussen, and at that point, Magnussen was P18, which at this point, because of the 2 DNFs so far, was last, and Magnussen DNFs because of that contact. By lap 42, Sainz overtakes Perez for P3. He is now in a podium position. But did Ferrari mess up pit strategy? He's on these medium tires. Yes, he can overtake Perez, but can he keep it going? Can he maintain this P3 podium position? Okay, and now also on lap 42, Russell, okay, who's now in P4, has contact with Perez, but it's a huge thing. Was Perez ahead? Was Russell ahead? Toto's on the radio. Okay, so Toto Wolff is the team principal for Mercedes. Very successful team principal. Obviously, his team had won 8 consecutive constructor championships. Very smart guy in F1. I would want him as a team principal. He gets on the radio to George Russell, who is complaining, listen, I was ahead. I should have that position back. But Toto's like, keep your head down. Keep racing. And the stewards did not get involved. They didn't call it a racing incident. They didn't give anyone time penalties. We're close to the end of the race. Just keep on racing. By lap 43, Sainz pits and comes out P9. Big question mark here. Why would Ferrari pit him so late in the race? Well, maybe those medium tires just weren't going to finish. So in their mind, he's at P3 right now. If he blows a tire, then they can DNF. At least if they pit to get on new tires, they could finish the race, salvage some points. Leclerc's out, no points for him. Sainz is their only hope at this point to get some points. So they pitted him late. A lot of people thought it was not a great decision, a lot of head scratching. But, of course, Ferrari and Carlos Sainz defended that position after the race. Now, at lap 45, with his new tires, Sainz has now the fastest lap and has gone from P9 to P7. And our boy Latifi, friend of the show, DNFs. Lap 47, Sainz is now P6 with the fastest lap on his new tires. At lap 47, also, Russell is hunting Perez, who has rough tires. And by lap 48, Sainz overtakes Alonso for P5, maintains fastest lap on his new medium tires. And Leclair takes responsibility for the crash. They interviewed Leclair after his DNF, and they allowed us to listen to that interview during the race. Lap 49, Zhou goes off the track. There's a yellow flag and then a virtual safety car. So the real safety car means the safety car actually physically comes out. Everyone bunches up and follows a safety car. A virtual safety car, there's actually no physical car on the track. Everyone reduces their speed, I believe, by 40%. You can't overtake. You have to maintain distance. And it's a way for them to just kind of slow the race down, allow them to remove the car from the track, safely get the driver off of the track. Usually, a virtual safety car means there's not a lot of debris or anything like that on the track. The car is typically in a more safe position. So obviously, if a car crashes and the car's in the middle of the track, they need a real safety car or maybe even a red flag, which means they stop the race completely. The cars go into the pit lane, because there's no way for the cars that are still running to safely get around the car that is crashed on the track. So the virtual safety car is like, actually, the yellow flag is probably the one with the least amount of restriction, then the virtual safety car, then the safety car, and then the red flag. So by lap 51, Russell overtakes Perez for P3. So there, Russell was complaining, thinks he should have had P3, and Toto knew that he could get that podium position on merit. But was Perez sleeping at the wheel? Russell gained this advantage as the virtual safety car was ending. But because there's no physical car on track that you can see go into the pit lane, the virtual safety car ends, And I'm assuming your team lets you know that it is ending in a lap or in a certain turn or something. But it literally looked like Perez did not know the virtual safety car was ending, but George Russell did. So George Russell on lap 51 had an easy overtake of Sergio Perez to get that podium position. And lap 53, the race is now over. So let's look at the final result. My boy, Max Verstappen, easily wins the 62nd running of the French Grand Prix in Le Castellet at the Paul Ricard circuit, followed by Hamilton and Russell on the podium. Teammate Sergio Perez for Verstappen at Red Bull is P4. Should have been higher, should have been on the podium, in my opinion. Carlos Sainz ends the race at P5, salvaging something for Ferrari. Then Fernando Alonso, two-time champion, now the most laps ever driven by an F1 driver, is at P6. Lando Norris for McLaren, P7. Esteban Ocon for Alpine, P8. Daniel Ricciardo, P9 for McLaren. Lance Stroll for Aston Martin, P10. So those are your points. Those drivers are in the points. The top 10 drivers get points. Out of the points is Sebastian Vettel, four-time world champion, at P11. P12, Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri. P13, Albon for Williams. P14, Bottas for Alfa Romeo. P15, Mick Schumacher for Haas. And those who did not finish the race were Zhou, Latifi, Magnussen, Leclair, and Tsunoda. Fastest lap goes to Carlos Sainz for Ferrari. That gets you a point. Fastest pit stop goes to Red Bull. And the driver of the day voted on by the fans is Carlos Sainz. This is the first double podium for Mercedes this season and Hamilton's best finish of the season. Like I said, everyone is asking, will Hamilton win a race this year? And I think if he does, it'll be because something like this happens, where Leclerc DNFs, Verstappen DNFs, they go out, they crash. I don't know if the Mercedes car at this point has the ability to actually win a race in its current form. I believe they would need to make more advancements to the car. But as we see here, with Leclerc's DNF, with what seemed like odd pit strategy from Ferrari, Hamilton and Russell get some major points for Mercedes and get on that podium. It was a very easy win for Max and Red Bull once he got in that P1 position. And there they are, Mercedes picking up the pieces. So what did I think of the French Grand Prix? Great race for me. Anytime Max wins, I love it. We saw some great battles in the beginning of the race. These new cars can follow each other. They can pass. DRS is powerful. We need powerful DRS so we can see some good racing. It would have been a better race if Leclerc was still in it. Would have Leclerc won? I don't know. But I know we would have had a great battle at the end between Verstappen and Leclerc. So let's check the current championship standings right now for the drivers and for the constructors. So Max Verstappen leads in the points with 233 points. Charles Leclerc has 170, gaining no points, obviously, during the French Grand Prix. Sergio Perez in third position with 163 points. Carlos Sainz has 144. George Russell, 143 over his teammate, seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton with 127. Lando Norris for McLaren with 70 points. Esteban Ocon for Alpine with 56 points. Valtteri Bottas for Alfa Romeo, 46 points. Fernando Alonso, two-time world champion for Alpine with 37 points. Haas's Kevin Magnussen has 22 points. McLaren's Daniel Ricciardo has 19. Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri has 16 points. Four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel for Aston Martin has 15 points. Mick Schumacher for Haas has 12. Yuki Tsunoda for AlphaTauri has 11. Zhou Guanyu, the first full-time Chinese driver ever in Formula One for Alfa Romeo, has 5 points. Lance Stroll for Aston Martin has 4. Alexander Albon has all of Williams' points with 3. And Nicholas Latifi down at the bottom. Why is he still in F1? Who knows? For Williams, has a big goose egg, 0 points. Let's look at the Constructor Championship. Red Bull Racing with 396 points. Ferrari, 314. Mercedes, 270. Alpine, 93. McLaren, 89. Alfa Romeo, 51. Haas, the only American team on the grid with 34 points. AlphaTauri, 27. Aston Martin, 19. And Williams with 3. So basically, these points are given during the race for the top 10 positions. And those points between the drivers, so the points for the constructor are basically adding up the points of the drivers during the race. So Verstappen for first place gets 25 points. Perez for fourth place gets 12 points, which means the team now has an additional 37 points, if my math is correct. Before we wrap things up, if Max Verstappen wins his second championship, he is the current champion right now. He won last year's championship. If he wins again this year for the Drivers' Championship and Leclerc does not, people will look back at this race as a turning point. You can see with 233 points, Max has a commanding lead over Charles Leclerc, who's in second place in the standings with 170. So this race could be a turning point. Thank you so much for listening to Talk F1 from the Michael Papinchak Show. Again, I am your host, Michael Papinchak. Please visit my website at tmpspodcast.com. You will find links to Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On YouTube, you will find not only F1 content, but watch content and content from my podcast, The Michael Papinchak Show, which we call TMPS. So again, please go to tmpspodcast.com, and thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Michael Papinchak Show.